So give me just a moment here. I want to introduce our panelists. So you met most of our roundtable participants, and I want to bring them back forward to kick off our discussion today. And especially I want to welcome, as we introduced a moment ago, Becky Flint, CEO of Dragon Boat Incorporated. And we've also got Brian Utes from Sophion. We've got Jerry Odenwelder in here from C Prime. And we've got Mike Madison from Proga Digital. So we are really pleased and excited to have you here. I know you've all got some really strong opinions and perspective and expertise on this large topic today, and would love to kind of dig in on it. One of the big questions that I keep hearing over and over, and would love to get your thoughts on it. I want to kind of let Becky lead with this, if you don't mind, Becky. Is we have this notion of product road mapping is a function and an activity that product managers are responsible for owning. So when we talk about road mapping tools specifically, that may not even be an accurate term for the types of tooling that we're talking about, because there are a lot of different solutions. But let's just talk a little bit from your perspective, if you could, about how software tools in general help enable product managers and product professionals and organizations to manage and communicate roadmaps better. Talk about the function of those a little bit, and then a little bit about how Dragon Boat fits into that.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jason. And what a lovely community. Nice to meet you all. I didn't realize that the session was longer than the original we talked, so I actually have to drop off at in 16 minutes, but at least we can get started. And I would love to connect with you all separately, and hopefully I can join future session. But going back to the main topic, Jason, about road mapping. Obviously, even before product management, road mapping existed, right? The roadmap is beyond product, and we all have our own personal roadmaps. For example, there's many ways to talk about it. So, and that word is being borrowed into the product management word. And so I want to just touch upon a couple of things. And like you said, Jason, there's a lot of opinions on road mapping tools, and the road mapping activities. So maybe at least share some of the perspective I have, and then we can talk about tool, how it's enabling that. We probably all know that product management is probably one of the most collaborative role. In particular, is that you really think about it, a product is not built by product manager. It is built by almost everyone else except product manager. But product manager will have to design, product architect, and structure and position, all that good stuff. So when we talk about product roadmap, it's also is kind of like a snapshot of something. That something is evolving. So keep that in mind. Let's using some of the examples. When we just a one person product team, that will use different way of product road mapping and design product, building product. When you have 10 people, when you have 100 people, or you have thousands of product managers, you all have to work very differently. The scope of the product is also very different. So then how we are going to manage that is very different. So that's the first part, like how many people involved in building a product. It means you have to do product differently. The second part is also very interesting, is that I'm just talking about product manager. I'm not even talking about the others. There are others in the product phase, right? There's engineering, there's a designer, then there's your go-to-market people. They give input, and they also take your product to market. So what about them? So, and what about product operations? They have to orchestrate between different product teams in function. Oh, what about the executives? So they have to give you a vision and the goals and the guide team forward. So when you think about the product road mapping or building product, all these are quote unquote users. I know sometimes people say, I have this product roadmap tool and it has no adoption. I say, what do you mean? 90% of your company is using the output of your product road mapping tool. So it's not a finger on the keyboard thing for your product manager. Thank goodness your product manager should not spend 90% of time fingers on the keyboard. So if you say your product road mapping tool has low engagement because your product manager not fingers on the keyboard, and I think that would be good to think about, is it really you want that to be a productivity tool for people typing keys, or you want it to be something that all operating your product organization actually drive outcomes. So that's sort of like who is your user and the size of your product. And the other thing to think about is like, what do you try to accomplish? So that's also something very interesting to think about. Like, for example, if you have, if your product team are the ones that does everything, talking to customers, gather feedback, and writing features, that everything, that you need something does everything. Now, if you are saying, okay, so actually I leverage a lot of the companies big enough, we have specialties, so customer success and sales team, and even product marketing does the first round of idea evaluation, and because they are closer to the customer. Then when they come to us, something is already filtered, not something say you guys suck. Then the product manager has to also look at that level of feedback, right? A different level of the company. So think about like, what do you try to accomplish in other people's role versus like a product manager's role, and how that kind of product planning and prioritization, communication, and tracking, that kind of stuff coming into play. It's also something to think about how a product would help. A product road mapping tool should be evaluated into your system. And then the other part of that is what kind of practice you're doing. I think there are companies that are very, very customer driven, that, sort of the, especially a larger company has, some companies go deal with a very large customer base, and they give you, you have a few large number of customers. So there's one way of do road mapping, versus you have companies that, facing a variety of the customers. So then you have to work in a different way in terms of how you get a product roadmap input into your process. And then that would decide how you design your product system. That's sort of like feature customer based, or you would be something like outcome based. I think you hear more of that. So what does it even mean outcome based, right? Is it this product manager's outcome, or is it all product managers' outcome? And let's talk about portfolio management. That's the overall outcome. And then the interesting thing I think you will hear is that there's never a single product manager raise their hand to say, look, my product is not important. Don't invest in my area. No, not a single product manager will say that, right? But as the product leader, product operations, you could say, look at where we are. These areas need a lot more investment. And these areas are doing fine. I'm going to move the investment to here. So truly outcome-based is actually looking at your overall, right? So that's where, who's your user of your road mapping tool? And how do you participate? And that's really something where I think in the end, to think about the product management and the road mapping, portfolio management, driving outcome, and the functional roles all play into how you evaluate, how you design, and how you kind of use product tool, a product operation system, if you will. And the common way of road mapping is a snapshot of a perspective of a part of your overall. That's sort of something like, to think about it. The reason I come over to there is like, hey, how do I even come up with this? Just some context. I joined the PayPal when it was very early, and it was growing up there, and it was playing the role of product operations, playing the role of portfolio management, and also lead product teams. And then we had to deal with all different aspects of product management, from the eyes of product manager to product leader to running the operations and the portfolio. So that's where we understood a lot more of like a product management in a different angle. So later on, work at a bunch of other companies, and now we work with the teams, 6,000 teams now over across the globe with different sizes. And that's really what we found out is when we help our customers and in our community, mostly focus on product operations, but we have a lot of product professionals as well, is to think about product management activity overall. And road mapping quite often is being used as a proxy for product management activity. And that's really where a lot of things coming through. That hopefully, I know I talk a lot, so I'm going to pause for a second and some sort of a high level summary of some of the learnings. Would love to share and hear more of you on what you guys think about it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Becky. That was a really good, robust overview and perspective. And clearly this is a space that you live in. So, and I want to hand it over to Brian as well, because one of the things that you're doing there, a lot of the work that you do at Sophion and that you've done in your product management career has been really in that innovation management and portfolio management as well. So when you're coming from that innovation perspective, talk about a little bit about your view on exactly what the function of road mapping looks like, and how you use software tools to help and aid in that whole process as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think Becky hit on a lot of these great topics, right? Whether it's in innovation, whether it's in, enterprise, internal product management, I think the biggest thing when it comes to tools and communication is the tool has to help you communicate with all of your stakeholders, right? And I think this is one of the biggest complaints with what most people would say is the top product management tool in the market, which I won't name because we all probably know what company that is, and I don't want to badmouth anybody's products. But it really helped you communicate with one team, which was your developers, right? And then you were like, okay, well, how am I going to tell this story to everyone else that's involved? And to Becky's point, everyone has a day job, right? And you're the part of the organization that has to tie everyone's day job to the mission that you're trying to complete. And so you need to be able to tell this story cohesively. And that's where, for me, especially when it comes to innovation stuff, those are the things that when we go through economic climates like we're going through right now, are the first thing on the chopping block, right? Like, okay, well, why do we have to invest in the future? We need to keep the lights on, right? And so it's even more important in those innovation areas to be able to tell that really compelling story about, who's our customer, what problem are we solving for them, right? So this isn't about, hey, we're going to generate $6 million worth of revenue if we do this thing, right? It's really about keeping that story on the customer and the pain we're solving for them, and then get into, okay, well, why does anyone care about solving that problem, right? And then finally, I think where most people spend all of their time on their road mapping, it's how are we solving it, and when are those things coming out, right? And there's so much more context that has to go into telling that story. And we're really trying to encourage people to really make sure that when you go into those conversations with different stakeholders, you have something that can tell that entire story, right? And to Becky's point, it's not so much about the adoption of the tool by the user, right? I agree. I had the opportunity to work at Citibank, and when we redesigned the mobile app at Citibank, the number one metric was, can we decrease the time that people spend in the mobile app, right? We didn't want people we're not a social media app, right? We wanted you to be able to pay your credit card, which was what was important to us and important to you, and then get on with your day. So how can we remove all of the friction in that process? And so it's not about the adoption and time spent by the user. It's really the adoption and the understanding that tool drives throughout your organization, right? So are other people checking and looking at, hey, what's the latest update to the roadmap? Why are we having those conversations? I think everyone on this call, and I had the conversation earlier this week with one of my product managers who had this experience. Everyone on this call, if you've been in product, having a roadmap conversation has had a challenge from somewhere in the organization that says, if you're just talking about what you're doing and when it's coming out, well, why are you doing that, right? I have a better idea than that. Why aren't you doing my idea, right? And so you need to have a tool that can tell this whole story so people can understand why you're focused on the things that you're focused on.
Yeah, that's a absolutely great perspective, and being able to align that perspective up and down the entire value chain and the entire organizational structure, so that everyone from the CEO down to the QA engineer understands why things are being done and how they contribute to the mission and the vision and the strategy of the company. So
Exactly.
absolutely. I want to invite everyone as we're going through this discussion today, feel free to raise your hands. For those of you who are new to Product Coffee, we're not a Talking Heads webinar. We are a coffee meetup to talk about product management stuff. If you have questions, if you have thoughts, you have perspectives that you want to jump in with, raise your hand. We will pull you to the front as well. I want to jump over to next. I want to jump over to Mike Madison. I want to kind of take a slightly different direction with you, Mike. And I know you have had the fortune of looking at, consuming, developing product roadmaps from quite a few different perspectives. You've been a CTO, you've been a VP of product, you're a founder of an agency now, and you've seen this in a lot of. And at one point in your career, you actually worked for one of the major product management software platforms, AHA. And so you've seen this from a lot of different perspectives. What I'd like to ask you to kind of talk about for just a moment is, sometimes we're fortunate enough to get to select the tools that we use. Other times we have operational processes and tools and technologies in place and business processes in place where there are certain expectations that have to be met. What have you learned in your career about really taking the challenge of road mapping and communicating and managing your technology roadmaps, and no matter what tools you have access to, finding the way to create the most value and impact?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I think the first thing I'd say is any tool that we select is a response to either a current problem or an anticipated problem. And so, for example, when I worked at the aforementioned road mapping company, I had the opportunity to talk during that time with over 400 product organizations. So some ranging from very small companies, some all the way up to very large global enterprises. And you can imagine smaller companies make that tool selection decision much more easily. Larger companies, there's a lot more red tape to go through in their procurement process, and there are times where they're just going to be, they have biases towards certain existing solutions. The key thread across all of these organizations is understanding what problem you're really trying to solve. And that's something that we as product managers say all the time. It's let's ask the why. Let's get down to what are you really trying to accomplish. And most of these organizations, most of the organizations that we talk with, have some flavor of the same set of problems. Either we're doing all this work, but it's not connecting to the business outcomes we want. So we need better visibility to our organizational goals, how we're going to solve for those goals, and we want to connect those goals to the specific tactical user stories or features or whatever that we need to implement. Or we have all of this feedback coming in from hallway conversations or from sales, but we don't have a way of tracking it or communicating those requests back to support or back to different parts of the organization so that we can have a meaningful priority conversation. Or engineering, see some of the conversation in the chat thread about tools that won't be named, but engineering might have their own plans, their own software tools, and we're sort of expected to live inside of them. But we also have these other things that we need to do for our go-to-market. We have to plan launch activities and plan the overall release, and not just the work with engineering. So product is not just the development, it's all of the other things that go around it as well. And so I think the key in being able to get through a procurement cycle or being able to advocate for a set of tools is understanding that problem you're trying to solve and being able to communicate the value to the other groups involved in the process. Because as Becky said, it's not all about just product. I mean, product, we're here to facilitate. We're here to be sort of a hub with a lot of spokes, for all the different spokes involved in the process. But I once worked with a VP of engineering who made the great point that we're all just sort of ancillary support staff. We're here to help the people who are actually building the product and supporting it and launching it and delivering it go faster and be more effective. And yeah, we can play an integral role in that. And what we do as product managers is an important piece to our product success. But we're just trying to help make everyone else effective. So if we can help those other groups understand how this new tool or how this new process for how we're going to track our work, how all that's going to help us be more effective, and how we can provide them with more visibility to what's happening, we're a lot more likely to get a partner alongside us in that process or that tool adoption that we need. I'll pause there. So.
Very good. That's thanks, Mike. And once again, if anybody wants to kind of jump in on this and share your own perspective or ask some questions and kind of dig in with our roundtable, I know Becky, you mentioned you're probably going to have to drop here in a few minutes as well. So I want to make sure that if anybody has any questions for you, that they get to jump in for those. It looks like you're going right now. So thanks for being here, Becky.
So nice meeting all of you. What a community. Congratulations, Jason. And a really nice meeting all of you. Such a very robust conversation. Would have loved to keep in touch. So I dropped in my LinkedIn, and hopefully we can find another chance to chat.
Excellent. Well, we will
Thanks,
talk
everyone.
to you again.
Happy holidays if we don't speak sooner.
Yes,
Thanks.
absolutely. Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. So let's jump over to Jerry as well, and I'm watching for hands here, but let's jump over to Jerry Odenwelder, who is on the team here at Product Copy. And Jerry, you've been around this space for quite a while as well. You're a product management coach for C Prime. In a prior life, you worked for Version 1, which was a great, one of my favorite tools in my early career for managing backlog, managing development workflow, and ultimately really helping to inform the execution of the roadmap. So would love your thoughts on your experience as you've looked across your clients and your coaching clients, especially around where folks tend to run into trouble and challenges when they're using technology tools to inform and manage their roadmap. What are some of the challenges that you've seen?
It's a good question. And I'll point out that all of your panelists have a background in product.
Yes.
Mike was at AHA. Brian is at Sophion now. Becky's at Dragonboat. And I have Version 1 experience.
It was an accident, Jerry. It's not as random.
It's a great accident. It's a great accident. A lot of really good.
The only one studying, y'all.
Did you say studying or stalking? I'm sorry, I missed it. It clipped.
Yes, and
I think a lot of the struggles that people have with road mapping when it comes to tools and technology is trying to get it to fit in there. And some tools are easier than others for making that work. Some tools are put extra complications in there. Again, I'm not going to badmouth anybody's tools, mainly because I've not used them all. I can tell you the tools that I remember customers telling me when I was product managing at Version 1 with regards to road mapping, telling me the tool that I should be looking at to model for our solution. But but a lot of it does come to, how do you visualize this thing, right? How do you put it in there in a way that is meaningful to communicate the message out to the other people that you're trying to communicate with? Because your roadmap, in a lot of ways, it's the result of prioritization and communication with your stakeholders. And in a way, it kind of informs a backlog of sorts for where you're going as a company. And so, yeah, the just getting it in there. I actually advocate folks work on it in a very free form fashion first, whether that be a whiteboard or a virtual, a digital whiteboard, some kind of free form place where you can move things around easy. Once you get it locked in there, then move it to, whatever tooling you want to use for managing it. and moving forward with it. Just because it's easier, right? I mean, if I'm moving a sticky note, it doesn't feel as heavyweight as typing in. A lot of the tools have, they're capturing other attributes around things to help you report and manage it. So it's a little more heavyweight, whereas the whiteboard is super lightweight.
Yeah, I'd second what Jerry's saying. I'm running into this right now, and starting with the tool, it's too much constraint. So the energy of your thinking goes to, am I using the tool properly versus getting it up in Miro.
Yeah.
And one of the things I did recently was actually took some of the templates out of the tool, replicated them in Miro just to provide the outline to then go through the exercises. And what's nice about that is freeing for me and the group to just have that free form. But it provided a backdrop to then take it into the tool that didn't create a lot of work, because that's been some of the angst I get from a lot of product managers, like, ah, shit, I just did all this on a whiteboard. I can't quite get it to fit, into my tool. But you got to do that homework ahead of time. Recently, that's been like, ooh, so that's kind of my new trick now to get that free form thinking easy, but then make it a nice transition into the tool.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea, especially if templatizing it based on the tool, so that you're kind of mentally drawing that picture back, so that when you get ready to put it in, it's much easier. And I know a lot of these whiteboarding tools have integrations. I've never used one of those. For me, it's just easier to type it in. It's a copy paste exercise. So I'll tell you what I'm curious to know about, though, in terms of road mapping, because I'm a big advocate of outcome-based roadmaps.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, you were talking to Brian earlier about innovation, and I feel like, outcome-based roadmaps really help you be innovative, whereas feature-based roadmaps or work-based roadmaps, a lot of times, I mean, you're locked into something at that point. So your teams are not able to be as innovative.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the struggles I find with outcome-based roadmaps is connecting those with leadership. It's very easy to say, yeah, we want to increase sales, as a simple example. We're going to increase sales by 20% or whatever. But a lot of times the executives and the leadership have a very particular thing in mind that they think is going to increase sales. And if you just have increased sales on your roadmap, then it gets to, well, are you doing my thing to increase sales?
Yeah.
I'm curious, does everybody struggle with that, or am I just in a unique boat here? And how do you work around it?
For me, I see it. I think there are a couple of different kinds of outcomes that you can focus on, and it makes a big difference which kind of outcomes you're talking about. The example you gave was that's an internal business outcome, an internally facing metric. I want to increase my sales, sure, and so that's a lot more difficult conversation to have, because you do get into, well, I think this will increase our sales more. I think that'll increase our sales more. And there's some data that you can do to kind of identify, some data work you can do to identify some probabilities around that. But the other side of the outcome-based roadmap conversation that I get really excited about is really more the customer outcomes. Yeah. What are we enabling? What opportunities are we addressing for our customers? And that becomes a much easier conversation to have, because you're not measuring something as broad as dollars or uptick in views or engagement. You're actually measuring against the real job that your customer is hiring you to do. And understanding that is a really important distinction for me. So I think that helps with those conversations personally, just to get everybody focused on customer outcomes as opposed to internal business outcomes when it comes to having discussions about the roadmap and the why we're doing things.
Yeah, having the customer outcome is better. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Who was about this?
I was just going to chime in there. I think, Jason, you're hitting the nail on the head there, right? I saw a great post the other day that somebody posted and said, increase revenue by $25 million is not a strategy.
Right.
And so often we get strategies and outcomes confused. And so we say, okay, well, our outcome is the strategy. And you've got to find a way to be able to tie those customer behaviors and the changes in customer behavior to the outcomes that you're going to drive, right? And that's where it comes back to the storytelling piece for me. to be able to say, hey, this is our customer, right? This is what's preventing our customer from hiring us more often to do more jobs, or from other customers hiring us to do the same job. And if we're able to solve these needs, then we should see those outcomes change that are for us, right? One of the things we're currently working on is kind of this way to visualize who your customer is, what pain you're solving for them, how you're solving it, and then what that means to the business, right? And getting that picture out there so people can see, okay, I can see how that's going to help us, right? So it really, the more you can focus on the customer and what you're doing for them, the more excited hopefully everybody inside of the organization gets, because they can start to tie those pieces together to say, okay, yeah, I can go sell X amount of more of this. I think that's the other challenge, especially for kind of B2B SaaS companies, or somewhere that you don't directly affect necessarily the number of sales or the revenue, right? If you're in a sales-led motion at a B2B SaaS company, at the end of the day, you could build the greatest product ever, and if it's not executed properly with the right sales processes, you're not increasing revenue at all. And so, it allows you to say, hey, I'm giving you better tools to go out and hunt, but I'm not the person that's going out and killing stuff. So at the end of the day, I can't really commit to saying, yeah, we're going to get $10 million more in revenue. I'm giving the sales team better tools to go get that revenue, and they're bought in that they think they can hit that number based on what we're doing.
Yeah, it's kind of like, focus on the customer outcomes, then the business outcomes will follow. Yeah, was it last summer, Jason, we had to talk about the North Star metric. I love using that tool to calibrate the team to the customer. And then just through those input metrics, it makes it super easy to connect that back to the company business objectives. And it just, everything starts to click then. Everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm doing this for the customer, but hey, coincidentally, this is also driving the product piece that's enabling revenue.
I think that the particular aspect that it enables is it provides an opportunity to challenge the rest of the organization to define good goals. And what makes a good goal is going to vary depending on where your organization's at in its maturity. So if you're a small startup, you might not have quarter upon quarter worth of data, years worth of data to inform a good forecast, a specific metric forecast for how much you're going to impact retention or drive sales growth. But as you become a larger and larger organization or a more mature organization, you hopefully start to have some of that data, and that can be helpful as well, because that helps the product team to understand, well, look, if we're saying, we want this particular business unit or this particular product area to drive X amount of growth, well, we have product initiatives on the table that we think can support sales that would drive, 3/4 of that. Well, that tells us we need to go and figure out more. On the other hand, if we have initiatives on the table that are higher risk but could blow past that number, or a fewer things that are much lower risk that help get us to that number, then it helps provide sort of that constraint-based approach. It helps to define what we're really trying to achieve, and how we're gonna so that we can select projects or select initiatives that are actually going to get us where we want to be.
Very good. Yep. Let's see here. Let's jump back over. I want to switch back up to kind of some of the secondary implications of effective roadmap implementation, effective roadmap management, effective roadmap communication, and some of the benefits that come from that kind of work, and how that can help product managers, individual product managers, really think about and discuss with your leadership where your processes are falling down or are standing up and kind of lifting up and supporting the organization. And I'll open that up to anybody who'd like to speak to it, but I would like to I'd like to spin back over to Brian to kind of start it, because I know that's a space that you spent a lot of time thinking about. So when things are going well or when things are going poorly, what are the conversations that individual contributors can have to help lead a discussion around the organization about improving our processes and tools?
Yeah, so I think specifically around processes and tools for individual contributors to say, hey, this is breaking down. You need a culture that's going to listen, right? The first step of that is, as leaders, creating a culture where we're approachable and people can come to us and say, like, hey, here's the problem we're having, right? To Mike's point about, we're not getting a tool because I want a tool. We're getting a tool because here's the problem, and we think this tool is actually going to help us solve for that problem, right? But so much of that depends on us being accessible and being approachable for them to bring those problems to us. So whether it's in one-on-ones, whether it's an open door policy, whatever it may be, I think that's step number one. And then step number two is making sure that you have a way to really evaluate the effectiveness of those tools, right? What are they going to change? How are we going to measure that change? And are we going to see behaviors that we want to drive inside of our organization? Earlier, I think Mike talked about the challenges with these tools, and the biggest challenge that you have with anything is inertia inside of the organization, right? People don't want to change their process, which is going to create some challenges to get the adoption, to get people to use it, and to get to engage with it. So having a plan for how you're going to address that, are we starting with a pilot, proving it out, and then expanding to other groups? Or are we going to have formal change management that helps us adopt this tool and really get the most out of it when we first buy it, or whatever it may be? So I think those are some of the things that we can do from being approachable. And then I think inside of your product, it's very similar, right? When you're a product manager as an individual contributor, the first thing that you need to drive alignment with inside of your organization is, okay, what are we trying to achieve, right? So where are we today, and where are we trying to go tomorrow? And then you can have conversations about how you're going to get there. But if you have two different views on where you're trying to go, every conversation you have is going to fall flat. So I think that's the first piece, is really making sure that you drive to that alignment on the goals. And then in your checkpoints, having a way to show that growth and show that progress towards those things in a measurable way, and say, hey, we're hitting this goal, we're on track for this other one, but this other one's lagging behind. And having a tool that can show why you've changed your plan because of the reality of your metrics and your goal achievement is something that really comes into play. And I won't, self-promote too much, but there is a tool that's offered by a software company that helps you do that. So I think that's the biggest
Well, you're a
thing.
sponsor, so you're allowed to self-promote.
Exactly. But I think that's the biggest thing, right? Like, we all know that we're going to have challenges. We all know that we're going to miss the mark at some point. But when you miss the mark, having a plan to how you're going to be back on track is way better than saying, hey, we're missing the mark, and here's the things that I'm doing, and having no tie behind what you're doing to your goals. So I think those are the two sides of that coin, both from a tool selection perspective and then just managing your product and having that same challenge with goal alignment and attaining goals.
That's a good point, Brian, around tracking to those goals, right? You've got your roadmap, you've set it out there, you've got alignment on it, but when you start down the path, If you don't have a way to track it, if you're tracking it in another, like you're going to track it in a tool somewhere, even if that tool's Excel or pencil and paper on your desk, you're tracking it somewhere. You're using a tool somewhere. But if they're not integrated, it can become problematic. And then you've got to kind of like blend this data together somehow. So having it all in one place is a real advantage for tooling, especially in the more distributed world that we live in now, where we're not all in the same room.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a huge call out, huge benefit, and enabler of those cross-functional broad teams. We got time for one question. I see Andy has his hand up. So Andy, why don't you jump on in, or question or perspective?
Yeah, a little bit of both, really. So I haven't yet found the tool that effectively manages all the details, dependencies, that like a dev team and that we need a product operations kind of role, or product owner kind of role, that has a view that is accessible by external customers. And it's not a massive headache necessarily to take the high level view that a customer needs and put it into some kind of consumable format that's simple. But the updating and the maintenance, it's just one more thing on our huge task list as product managers, right? But I'd love to know if maybe I've missed it out there. Maybe there is some magical methodology tool, something out there that rolls that all up in this beautiful, amazing format that's out there on the portal or wherever you put it, which needs to be accessible, by the way. That's something else I harp on all the time. So anyway, I'll open that up. So can't wait.
I think there's going to be some variations depending on licensing for all these different tools, but I'm obviously not familiar with all of them. I know AHA does it. There's a presentations roadmaps functionality in there. It's primarily read only. Like there's different licensing stuff related to if you need to be able to have people commenting back. Today, I use a lot of since I'm working more of an agency context with more client projects. I use Monday.com quite a bit because I'm able to allow external users to come in and comment collaboratively, and that's just a better license setup for my needs. So I'm sure there are others. Anybody else know of any others that have that capability?
Yeah, there's definitely a few out there. I know our tool Accolade has a share with stakeholders view that you can kind of put together whatever dashboard you want and show those dependencies and things like that. I think one of our challenges as product people is how do we break those dependencies, and how do we find a way to compartmentalize the deliverables so that we can kind of say, hey, here's what we're doing, and not have as many lines going across different work streams saying, well, we can't really start this one until that one's done, and things along those lines. And I understand that can go all the way up to organizational design challenges, Andy. So that might be something that's out of scope for what you can do. But I think that's one of the other things is trying to find a way to look at the roadmap and say, hey, how can I remove some of these dependencies in a way that allows me to deliver value more incrementally, and then be able to kind of show, all right, here's what I'm doing for people down the road. So I think that's the other challenge that we have to face as just product professionals. And then I'll throw in that that's the current work that is happening on our other tool, Acclaim Products, is to create not just a Gantt chart and a flow, but I forget who was talking about use cases for generative AI, but this is one that we think actually has some legs as far as telling a story behind your roadmap and then being able to share a version of that out, either with invited stakeholders or out to the public. So look for that coming in Q1, and we'll share that out as it becomes available. Don't worry, there will be a heavy press release behind that one, I'm sure, because that's a common problem.
Yep. Awesome. I want to thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Becky, even though you've had to leave, and all those who jumped in and contributed to the conversation. We are about at the top of the hour. Before we drop off completely, I think we've got a really fun announcement to talk about for those who are within striking distance of Atlanta. So let me hand it over to Holly, our head of programming, to talk about